to our report, I guess, just to kind of clarify a little bit on my understanding of the permitting front. There was one environmental permit application that was submitted to the Department of Environmental Protection for the sewage project, the Mingo Sewage Project. That was the NPDES permit, which was reviewed by the department, and then later issued just before Christmas of 2023. Like we've talked about in these meetings before, when you do a sewer project, there's two main environmental permits that you need. The first is the NPDES permit, and the second is the Water Quality Management Part 2 permit. And the Water Quality Management Part 2 permit dives into the specifics of the sewage treatment plant design. When our office, in conjunction with Dennis's office and Michelle, and another of the former supervisors last year, met with the DEP in, I think it was October 2023, at the DEP's office. We asked them about their records, and we've also done file review processes to obtain the records that the DEP has into the permit applications, and they have no record of a Water Quality Management Part 2 permit, the application being submitted to DEP for review. So
what does that mean?
I remember when we were there and they were saying that they got a permit application, but it was not in the order it should have. Like, it should have been this permit before this permit, and they said, oh, well, we'll give you that when we give it.
Right.
And I didn't remember all the details because I don't know all of the synonyms, or at least at the time I wasn't as familiar with them as I am today, but.
So what does it mean, what does it mean for the permits that haven't been submitted and or completed?
likely the design wasn't completed for the sewage treatment plant, which would be a reason why the application wasn't yet submitted. To Michelle's point, DEP, their policy, as I understand it, is that they will not issue, you need the two permits for a sewer project. They will not issue one without the other. They deviated somewhat from their protocol at the end of December of last year when they issued the NPDES permit without the water quality management permit. And they did that because they were running up against a time limitation. They needed to do something with the permit application that they did receive. So, like we talked about last time, once you have your environmental permits in hand, then you can go to a funding agency to solidify a funding offer to fund a project of multiple millions of dollars like this.
They didn't want to review the one permit without the other. Didn't make sense. In
part
the
of
end, in 2023, after we met with them downtown, I believe they reviewed that just to keep us compliant with the consent order. I
And
would
they
think
made
they
a
did us a
decision.
favor.
Right.
It was something.
They made a
It was
decision.
movement yeah, they made a decision, it was something. But they didn't want to review the permit should have come in together. The one NPDS, which is what a dirt moving basically permit, was submitted, but the design permit was not submitted, and they wanted to review them together. Concurrently.
Yeah.
They said, why would we review this without that? And that's the way Harshman had submitted it, like, in mid-2022.
Was any of these environmental permits on the precipice of being granted in December of 2022?
2022, October of 2022?
Correct.
They had the NPDS permit submitted, and the DEP was saying it should have been, they didn't want to review it because it should have been with the other.
They submitted the NPDES permit, I believe, in July of 2022. Obviously, DEP has no record of receipt of a water quality management permit, the other permit that they need. So I have no idea what the status of that permit application.
So there really weren't any environmental permits gonna be granted by DEP in October 2022?
I don't believe so. It
No more
did,
than conceptual.
the permit didn't get issued until December of 2023.
December.
2023?
After we
December
met
of
with- After
2023.
we met with them downtown.
At
It
the
left us
conclusion of 5
somewhat-
months ago.
So all the
And
information
it
you've
was
heard
totally out of their
was
normal protocol.
No
They
validity.
did a favor to us.
So there was a question I asked, if there was a, so there was a question asked by somebody about grants.
Yes.
Can you tell us how much the grants, how many grants there were, how much the grants were for, and whether those grants are still there.
And we have continued to apply for grants for this project, no less than, which is no less than any other board did.
As I understand it, there were 2 grants received, both of them from Washington County LSA. The first grant was approximately $300,000, and that money was used to complete the Act 537 planning process, which is the initial conceptual design and the layouts, and that was around the time of 2019 and 2020.
And that went to an engineering company to do that process, right?
Correct, and I believe that money has been fully spent.
Fully spent, and Senate engineer, who was awarded the LSA thing as being the lowest bid, had sent letters to the township because they weren't the township was not releasing the money to them. And they sent a letter here stating something similar to the fact of, although we are aware that you've decided to redo the 537 with your own engineer, we were the awarded bidding person, and that we deemed that 80% of the work your engineer was our work. And that all they did was add one more option that we didn't find viable.
And that's the other engineer was
And-
Harshman.
Harshman was the second engineer, so in the end, they paid Harshman relatively over $300,000 to redo what Senate did. And Senate's words were that it was, regurgitating their work plus adding another, they added a package plan that they didn't think was a viable option.
And that brings us to grant number 2, which
And that was no grant money was spent to give Harshman the over $300,000 to redo that.
Right.
it's my understanding the second grant was in the approximate amount of $500,000, and that was towards spending on the project costs, which at the time were, considerably more than that $500,000. They had also estimated they were gonna collect a $4,500 tap-in fee per each of the residents who were connecting to the system. And even after accounting for the $500,000 grant that was received and the roughly $450,000 that they were going to collect in tap-in fees from the residents, the estimated monthly cost was still going to be in excess of $125 per resident per month. That was in the 537 plan. I do not believe that any drawdown has occurred on the $500,000 at this point, and I believe we've continued to keep LSA up to speed with
And
where the
looking for
project
grant,
stands and trying to find other funding sources to bring that.
Well, also
Monthly cost.
re-looking at the other options that, if you saw in your right to know, it appeared that in 2017, Harshman did not find that a viable option either. He put in that one paper that the only viable option was to put in the lift station to send it over into the Nottingham system, and I think he actually did pricing for that of about $600,000. And that was for sending it over to the Peters Creek sanitary system, and he stated in that thing that that's the only viable option, probably price-wise. And then somehow between 2017 and whenever, it turned into the 537 being done by Senate, then being redone by Harshman with that other option on the table, to condemning a Bannahaskey, trying to condemn a Bannahaskey problem in a lawsuit with that, then purchasing the Lico property. And then it's conceptual, nothing more than conceptual.
There's never been a formal design that you could go forward with in terms of getting grant money, right?
I have not seen one for a wastewater treatment plant, no.
And that would be, in order to go to PennVest and RUS, you would need something like that.
You need to have a completed design that's permitted by the state with all environmental permits.
And has that been done at all?
It has not been.
And how long would it take to do a design like that?
A long time,
Year?
roughly, probably, yeah. Starting from scratch, yeah.
So, do you understand this is Bannahaskey about what's going on so far?
I can follow.
So, what we're trying to say is, contrary to what somebody else said, this plan wasn't even close to starting. We're
There were
not,
newsletters printed years ago that it was gonna be in the spring of 2021 or something, there was no viable reason to believe that ever. How long has it been since 2022, we were in court at Judge Lucas's courtroom over the Finleyville El Rama project. Now, that was all decided in then, and we have cut them a check a long, long time ago, and that is not building a package plant, that is just putting in lines and a lift station. And it's still, how long do you think, John, since you're our Peters Creek?
537 plan just went up to the, was ready to go to the state, and we're probably talking once from approval, a year.
Yeah, I mean, they still need to get the same permits.
Yeah.
They need a water quality management permit and a NPDES permit for that project. And that permitting process will take some period of time after the 537 plan is approved.
I'm still kind of in question how Finleyville El Rama Road became a priority over Mingo Circle sometime in 2021. I don't know why it all of a sudden flipped to this as a once the court order from Judge Lucas's courtroom that we were bound to do that. That's the direction that it went, when the money went towards there.
With help from Peters Creek.
With, oh yeah, absolutely, Peters Creek Sanitary gets 50% of that project as well.
Well,
After spending over $300,000 in court with Union Township, and probably a few $100,000 of your taxpayer money went to court.
it's worth pointing out that the township right now, at this very moment, is in a deliberate process with DEP to address the failure to meet the implementation schedule of the current consent order. That's an ongoing process. We're not sure what that outcome will be. At this point, we're waiting to hear back from
If I'm correct,
solicitors.
didn't the DEP, they reached consent with the previous board? Basically, if I'm correct, the previous board wasn't even meeting the steps of that consent order, am I correct? Correct?
Yes.
By the end of 2022, they were threatening a fine of $250 a day. Now, if they were supposed to be done by the end of 2022, the DEP's already talking $250 a day, which is the reason we all ended up down there in 2023,
Right.
after scheduling a meeting at which we stated, you can fine Union Township, it's not gonna help these people, like, here we are at this date, we wanna move forward, but finding the township doesn't help people get sorted. Like what can we do? How can we move? We didn't even have documentation, we had messed up files
Right.
and so we had to get the documentation from the DEP just to review it ourselves. If you look at the meeting minutes, we didn't talk about Mingo Circle storage in 2022 when it was like, it was all Finleyville El Rama Road. And 2021 didn't have much talk about it either, while I was in the audience. It just, we didn't realize how, getting our heads around it, and now they are getting theirs as new. I gave them all the same information I gave you, the kids start. And they've got a lot of information with PJ and Dennis. The cartoon timeline created thing is, I mean, there was newsletters, like I said, there was newsletters, we were gonna have storage in 2021. We got mailed out newsletters. That wasn't even a possibility.
Is there any other discussion on that?
Now you have the rest of their engineer report.
Okay,